Hi, my name's Cody, and I'm a software engineer. In this video, I'll be talking about whether to build or buy, interacting with procurement and sales, and collecting feedback after shipping something to users. This is part of a series on being a solo developer at an established company. If you want to watch the previous video about exploring systems currently in use and interviewing stakeholders, I'll put a link in the description. The content in this series is sort of half guide for others, half journal for myself. I hope you find it useful. So, you've watched the previous videos, created a project doc, done your stakeholder interviews, and feel like you have a good handle on how to solve the problem you're investigating. Excellent. Now, the easy part, actually building the software. I say that a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but that's the topic I think will be least useful to cover. As a developer who's planning on working by yourself, I assume you have some experience building software already. Most information out there focuses on this building process, and so I won't cover that too much here. But I do have some general advice. Firstly, do your work iteratively and in small units. Publish those units to stakeholders and integrate their feedback frequently. And finally, avoid Jira if you can help it. But let's say you don't actually want to build something yourself. What do? Well, you could pay somebody else to do it. But how do you decide to do that? This decision is commonly referred to as build versus buy. The main idea here is that there are pros and cons whichever way you go, and you need to be able to weigh them according to your own needs. The obvious benefit to building is that you're a software engineer. This is your job, and presumably you know exactly what you need to build. But there are costs to building too. When you build, you must support users now and into the future, maintain documentation, make sure the thing you build is available consistently, make sure the thing you build is secure and fits within your company's legal rules. You must also fix bugs, make sure it's easy to use, and finally, in addition to actually executing on the things above, the company has to pay you to do them. On the other hand, you can skip most of that if you just pay someone outside the company to do it all for you. There are also costs to buying, though. Firstly, you have to do a bunch of work to find, vet, and then buy a third-party tool. Even after all that, it probably won't be a perfect fit for your use case. You'll probably have to pay a lot of money for it, and you'll expose yourself and your company to more risk by using a product you don't control. They can raise the price, change the functionality, or have security issues you aren't aware of. This is a bit obvious, but I advocate buying when it's cheap, or when building is expensive. Maybe you can find some great deal, or some niche product that really serves your use case well and would otherwise be very expensive to do yourself. Think about cases where the knowledge required to build the thing and the cost of getting it wrong are both higher than normal. Security products typically occupy this category. I also think you should buy when the functionality you want is something that isn't core to your business, maybe logging or feature flagging. Ask yourself whether or not owning this functionality will make your company better and more competitive. For example, will building your own logging system that's 1/4 as good as Datadog help your company beat its competitors? Will customers have a better experience because you built a system yourself rather than buying it? Consider whether or not the product you want or the knowledge required to build it will serve you in other areas of the business. If you can't reuse that stuff elsewhere, it might make more sense to buy. On the other hand, you should build when the functionality you need is specific to your company, or existing tools won't integrate with systems you already have. Every company is unique, and sometimes there really isn't a good tool out there for you. The choice to build or buy can involve many factors, and so there's no one set criteria on how to make this decision. Take your time, be systematic about the costs, risks, and possibilities, and you'll do well. Let's say you decide to buy instead of build. Not a lot of software engineers have experience with that, so let me outline the process. Generally, it can be broken down into a few different components: requirements, research, sales, trial, and procurement. Let's start with the first. Before you go out and buy something, you got to know what you're looking for. The very first step here is to think about what your problem is and the general shape of a solution. Make sure to write this all down in some sort of notes document too. You'll be sure to reference this information a lot. The requirements you create should be specific enough such that they're actionable and you can clearly see when they've been met, but not so specific that they don't allow any wiggle room in your evaluation of products. There will never be something that meets 100% of your needs exactly. After you've created your evaluation criteria, make sure it's something you'd feel comfortable sharing with others, including the salespeople you'll be meeting with down the line. You don't have to, but they love it when they get a clear list of requirements you need them to meet. Additionally, make sure you'll be comfortable buying a product that meets the requirements you've outlined exactly. If you notice you feel squeamish or uneasy about this prospect, then you're probably missing something and could stand to flesh things out a bit more or add a few more items to your list. Once you've got your list of requirements, it's time to find some potential matches. You can do this by asking around at your company, Googling, or just looking at something like Product Hunt. I find it helpful to build a separate document to track all this stuff and link it in your notes. That document should include any important dates or people involved, as well as a table where the columns are each of your requirements and other information like the salesperson name and email, product price, status of the investigation like investigating, talk to sales, won't buy, etc. After gathering a few candidates, it's time to take your investigation to the next level and engage with sales. This may feel like a big task to talk to a salesperson, but remember, you're in control here. You don't have to do anything you don't want to and can end the sales relationship for any reason at any time. You might wonder why, in this day and age, you need to talk to a human at all. When's the last time you had to chat with someone before you created a Google account or bought a toothbrush on Amazon? Well, companies could sell to you like that. It's definitely a choice that some of them make. But as you move out of simple things like toothbrushes and into enterprise software sales, the deals become bigger, the requirements more complex, and the whole thing gets more time-consuming. Salespeople can actually reduce the burden that comes with these increasing demands and streamline the whole process. In the same way that engineers work on details and facts, salespeople work on relationships. Product websites won't list their enterprise pricing because the salespeople want to start a relationship with you before you enter the sales funnel. Relationships allow salespeople to learn more about you, pitch their product to your specific needs, and negotiate. The salespeople want to help you buy from them. They'll help you research their product, buy their product, and use their product, because ultimately, that means you'll pay them now and in the future. They also have relationships with every other company that's buying from them. You can usually pick their brain about how others are handling the same problems you're running into, even if those problems don't have to do with the thing they're selling. As an engineer, this whole human-centered sales process might feel a bit weird after working with computers every day, but try and recognize all the work they're taking off your plate. Now that you've set up some sales meetings, how should you prepare, and what should you expect going into it? Well, hopefully you've taken my advice and been writing everything down as you look for something that fits your needs. You can use these notes as a starting point. I like to create a meeting doc and make sure it includes the problem you're trying to solve and the general solution you're imagining, a time frame, your budget, other individuals or teams that might need to be involved, and some information on your procurement process, which I'll talk about later in this video. In terms of what to expect in a sales meeting, there will be a few participants, you, obviously, as well as a salesperson who is comfortable with technical subjects but not a developer, and maybe a sales engineer who is much more of a developer than the salesperson but spends a lot of time on sales calls like this rather than writing features and fixing bugs. The salesperson will be in charge of pitching you on the product, negotiating, and coming up with a plan for you to make a purchase. The sales engineer will be in charge of answering any of your specific technical questions, like, how can we route traffic from your product through our custom AWS firewall rules? They're probably also a nerd like you. I've found that sales calls tend to follow a certain format. The first 5 minutes are small talk and intros. The next 5 is where you walk through what brought you there, what your problem is, and what things are important to you. For the next 10 or 15, they pitch you on their product and tell you how it will meet your needs. And after the pitch, they ask if you have any questions and you discuss. Be sure to take notes during this whole thing so that you can review them later and add them to your research document. If this is your first meeting, at the end, they'll probably tell you they think what they're selling would be a great fit and that you should start a trial as soon as possible. Don't feel pressured to go ahead if you don't feel like it's a good fit. If you're still interested but need some more information, say so. You can even couch your response in something external. "Oh man, your product sounds so great. I'm really excited about it. I just need to loop in my manager on what we discussed here today. Once I get approval, I'd love to talk to you about a trial." At the end of every meeting, the salesperson will probably work to set up, quote-unquote, next steps. Whether that's a trial of their product, another meeting, a discussion with another party, the salesperson will make sure things keep moving. What if, after talking to sales, a product isn't a good fit? Well, you gotta say no. Saying no to salespeople can be a bit different than saying no in other parts of your life. If you say no but don't have conviction, they'll probably keep trying to work with you after you've decided you don't want to anymore. The worst way to do this is to ghost them. They'll keep coming back like Sally Mae keeps coming for your student loans. Have a concrete reason to say no. Here are some reasons I've said no to salespeople in the past. Their product doesn't fit my requirements. Their product is too expensive. But here, never actually just say that their product is too expensive. Tell them how their pricing exceeds your team budget, or your company's appetite for spending, or something else. Another reason, another salesperson with another product beat them to a sale. Or, my company's priorities have shifted and we no longer need their product. Never just make up a reason here. They'll ask you for specifics and catch you in a lie, which is very awkward. Saying no without a concrete reason will probably result in a situation where you've tried to end the sales relationship and the salesperson will try to keep it going. And the salesperson will probably win because keeping relationships going is literally what they do all day, every day. It will be weird. To wrap it up, dealing with sales can be uncomfortable as a developer, but ultimately leads to less work for you and a more efficient buying process. The goals of sales are to establish a relationship, find out whether the product meets your needs, and to help you buy the product. In order to test out a product, the salesperson will probably recommend a trial. This is usually super helpful, though it can require a fair amount of work to get set up. A trial will allow you to make sure the product you're looking at will be a good fit. Work with your salesperson to find a small area where the trial can be run for an agreed-upon amount of time. As you execute on your trial, make sure to collect feedback from everyone and record it in your notes doc. When the trial is done, summarize your notes and decide whether or not you want to move forward. Having concrete feedback from users will go a long way towards finding a product that's a good fit for your use case. You can even share the feedback directly with the salesperson. They might know ways around any problems you've run into. Every company has a process for buying things, and that's called procurement. Procurement is different from one company to the next, but there is something that's the same wherever you go. Everybody hates it. It's right up there with spiders, sharks, and lawyers. But in order to buy a product on behalf of any company larger than a startup, you will have to go through the procurement process. If I sound like I have baggage here, it's because I do. But because you must, how do you navigate procurement? First, find the person or team that's responsible for procurement at your company and set up a meeting with them to learn about the process, how long it usually takes, and what's required along the way. Some companies even have documentation and automated tools that can do it all for you. But when the documentation is out of date and those tools drive you insane with their buggy UI, You'll be glad you've set up a meeting with a human before you shove your keyboard through your monitor. All that being said, the procurement process exists for a reason. Your company needs to keep track of the money it spends and make sure the things it buys meet a certain standard of quality. The general outline for procurement is something like request, then review, then approval or denial. And a review typically looks at your purchase through a bunch of different lenses, like security, legal, technical, and anything else specific to your organization, like HIPAA if you're a company that deals with health information. These reviews exist so that the company isn't exposed to any undue risk from something you purchased. I'm sure you can think of many examples of companies that have been hacked or sued, not because of something they did themselves, but because of something one of their partners or vendors did. This is a very real outcome, and businesses want to do everything they can to avoid it. Procurement can take anywhere from days to months, depending on the size of your company and how many people are required to sign off on your request. Most of that is just waiting around. Plan for it, and remember that the people reviewing your request are human too. Try to treat them with kindness and respect. Once you build your project, you'll need to tell people about it. You might think that if you build something good, people will use it and enjoy it by default. That can be true in some cases, but mostly it's not. Mostly, you'll need to tell other people about the thing you built. Engineers tend to have a negative view of anything at all related to marketing, but I'm here to tell you it's useful and it's necessary. The bottom line is that if people don't know something exists, then they won't use it and will never think about it. If marketing wasn't effective, companies wouldn't spend so much of their money on commercials, search placement, and marketing teams. So, knowing this, it's not enough to just release your project and hope for the best. You've got to tell people about it and help them use it. Here's how this generally works for me. First, I release a project. Then, I document that it exists in the relevant places. This can be a README, the company wiki, or some sort of marketing page. Then, I tell people about it and reference the documentation I just created. And a little bit later, I tell people about it again. And at the end, I collect feedback and provide support for users, which I'll talk about in a moment. And finally, I decide whether or not it was a success or failure based on the goals I initially came up with in my notes document. If it was a success, I tell people about it and reflect on why it worked. If it was a failure, well, it might depend on your company culture, but I like to tell people about those too. They're good learning experiences. In order to determine if your project was a success, you'll have to collect feedback. This feedback can take many shapes and can range from informal chats with coworkers to full-blown statistical things like Net Promoter Scores. As a solo engineer, I've relied on analytics within an app, user interviews, and simple Google Forms surveys as ways to collect feedback. Even something as simple as gathering quotes from users is useful. This evidence you collect will not only inform future improvements to the thing you're working on, it'll also give you nice tidbits you can include in your next performance review or personal hype doc. So, now you're prepped and ready to be a solo engineer, from thinking of things to work on to releasing projects to users. Hopefully you found all this information useful and learned a little bit about how to build something non-trivial. I'd love to hear what you thought of this series, and if you have any learnings of your own, please leave a comment below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.